My name is Samantha, and the day my parents said no was the day something in me snapped. I still remember the way they sat across from me at that glossy kitchen table in their designer home, untouched cups of tea between us, their faces tight with fake sympathy. I had brought them Luke's diagnosis. My 5-year-old son, battling a rare form of leukemia, needed experimental treatment not covered by insurance. My father barely glanced at the paper before sliding it back to me. Medicine isn't a miracle, Samantha. Sometimes you just have to accept reality. Reality? My reality was watching my son lose weight, sleep, hope, while I worked double shifts as a nurse just to keep him alive one more week. My mother's voice was colder than the stainless steel countertops. You should have thought about this before getting pregnant by a loser. Actions have consequences. They didn't say no because they couldn't afford it. They said no because helping me would mean admitting I mattered. And then came the knife to the gut. Exactly 33 days later. I saw it on Instagram first. My brother Jason grinning like a prince at a fairy tale wedding. My parents standing beside him, beaming. The caption? A family worth celebrating. Our son finally found his match. The venue was a private estate in Napa. The catering, Michelin-starred. The dress code, custom Dior. They didn't just pay for the wedding. They gave the newlyweds a condo in Miami as a gift. $500,000. I was shaking when I saw the post. Luke was asleep next to me on the couch, an IV in his arm. I looked at his pale little face, and then at the hospital bill glowing on my phone screen. I had begged them. I cried. I offered to sell the last things I had, and they said no. But not to him. Not to Jason, the golden boy lawyer marrying the daughter of their business partner. Jason, who once told me, "Honestly, Sam, you make everything dramatic. It's not our fault you're a single mom." That night, I made a promise to myself. They didn't want to save my son? Fine. I would save him myself, and they would pay another way. I found the money. That's another story. But here's what matters. They thought I was weak. They thought I would crawl away and cry. Instead, I found something stronger than blood. And when the moment came, when the truth hit them in front of 100 wedding guests and flashing cameras, they finally saw me. Not the black sheep. Not the failure. Not the single mother. But the reckoning they never saw coming. Because when someone you love is dying and the people who should care turn their backs, there's no going back. There's only forward. And forward, for me, meant fire. People see me now. Strong, calculating, maybe even ruthless. And they forget who I used to be. I was the girl who once believed in happy endings, in family, in forgiveness. I'm 32 years old, a nurse, a mother, and until everything broke, I was the kind of person who still sent birthday cards to parents who forgot mine. My son, Luke, is 5. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me. He's got my eyes and his father's grin, and a laugh so full of life it used to make strangers smile. Before the diagnosis, he was always moving, racing around the apartment like he was training for the Olympics. Now he can barely climb into bed without help. They say the leukemia he has is rare, aggressive. They also say the chances aren't great without an experimental treatment that insurance won't touch, and I couldn't afford it on a nurse's salary. Not with rent, food, medications, and hospital bills piling up. We live in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago, next to a laundromat and above a nail salon. You can hear the L train every 10 minutes. The walls are thin. The radiator clicks all night. And the only thing newer than 2002 in that apartment is Luke's IV stand. Every spare dollar I had went to his care. I'd skip meals and pretend I wasn't hungry just so he wouldn't feel guilty eating dollar store mac and cheese for dinner again. I sold my engagement ring, small as it was. I even pawned my mother's gold bracelet, the one thing of hers I had left that wasn't bitterness. I never planned to be a single mom. I married young, foolishly, and fell for the wrong kind of man. He was charming but aimless, always chasing a big idea that never came. When Luke was born, things changed. For me, at least. I grew up overnight. He didn't. When he left, my parents barely blinked. They always saw it coming. And they never let me forget it. They own a chain of restaurants, upscale places with rustic lighting and menus that charge $20 for a salad. They're local celebrities in their neighborhood, always posting about family values and legacy. They love to pretend they built everything from scratch. But it was my grandfather, their father, who laid the foundation. A man who actually had a heart. When I told them about Luke's condition, I didn't beg right away. I showed them the paperwork, the prognosis, the numbers. I asked them to be grandparents. I asked them to see him, not as my child, but as their blood. My father looked at me like I was a stranger. You made your choices, Samantha. Maybe it's time to take responsibility for them. My mother just sipped her tea and said, "It's not our job to clean up your mistakes." I left their house that night and cried in my car for an hour. Luke was asleep in the back seat, holding his stuffed giraffe. He didn't know I was breaking. They adored my brother Jason, of course, their pride and joy, the golden boy who never disappointed them. He went to law school, wore suits that cost more than my rent, and never dated outside the right circles. When he got engaged to the daughter of their longtime business partner, they practically threw a parade. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Jason gets a beachfront condo. I get silence. And yet, despite everything, he called me. "Hey, Sam," he said casually, like we were close. "You're still coming to the wedding, right? It means a lot to Mom and Dad." I remember looking at my cracked phone screen, sitting at Luke's bedside while he slept, tubes and monitors around him. "You mean more than Luke does?" I asked quietly. Jason paused for a moment, then chuckled. "Come on, don't be dramatic. It's not the same thing." Number it wasn't. I was the one cleaning vomit off hospital sheets. I was the one trying to explain to a 5-year-old why his hair was falling out. I was the one staying awake at night, doing math with pills and paychecks. But sure, I was the one being dramatic. What burned the most wasn't just the rejection. It was the hypocrisy. They posted pictures of their family dinners, captions like, "Family is everything." They wrote about cherishing the small things, while my son begged me not to go to work because he hated being alone with a sitter who didn't know how to change a central line. I'd stare at those photos, at the smiles, the curated joy, and I'd wonder if they even remembered what Luke looked like. He used to call my father Grampy and bring him weeds from the park, thinking they were flowers. My mother used to braid my hair while I studied for exams. There was a time when I thought they loved me. Now they loved what Jason represented. Success, stability, a clean narrative. Me? I was the mess they tried to erase. But I couldn't afford to be erased. Not when Luke's life was on the line. And if they thought I'd just disappear quietly, they didn't know me at all. I didn't want to go to the wedding. Every fiber of my being screamed against it. But I went. Not because I wanted to celebrate Jason. Not because I cared about what my parents thought. I went because sometimes you have to walk into the fire to understand just how far the flames will reach. The estate was straight out of a bridal magazine. Wrought iron gates, a winding driveway lined with white roses, valets in crisp uniforms, and guests, hundreds of them, draped in designer silk and dripping with self-importance. I wore a secondhand dress, one I'd altered myself to fit. My shoes hurt. My heart hurt worse. Jason spotted me near the back of the ceremony seating and waved with a politician's grin. My parents? They looked through me like I was another hired server. I should have left then. But I stayed. I smiled at people I barely knew, accepted air kisses from aunts who once told me I'd ruined my life, and tried not to think about Luke lying in a hospital bed without me. Then came the toasts. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter echoed under chandeliers the size of cars, and my father stood to speak, holding his champagne with the same hand he once slammed on the table when I told him I was pregnant. "We are thrilled," he said, "to welcome a new daughter into our family. And to celebrate this next chapter, we have a little surprise. He gestured to a projector screen. A video montage of Jason and his new wife played. Vacations in Greece, ski trips in Aspen, wine tastings in Tuscany. My stomach twisted. And as a wedding gift, my mother chimed in, clutching Jason's arm like he was royalty. We're giving them a condo in Miami, right on the beach, somewhere worthy of their future. The crowd gasped and applauded. I didn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then I heard it. Soft, but clear. My mother's laugh, sharp as glass. She leaned toward a woman beside her and whispered, "Finally, something in this family worth celebrating." The words sliced through me. Not Luke's bravery, not my sacrifice, not even the fact that I was still standing. Number this, a wedding full of strangers in borrowed glitter, was what they thought mattered. I slipped away, heels echoing on polished floors, through a hallway until I found the guest bathroom. I locked the door behind me and collapsed against the sink. I cried. The kind of cry you only allow when no one can hear. The kind that curls your spine and cracks your ribs. You always dramatize. My father's voice echoed in my head. The boy can wait. A wedding can't. Tears soaked the neckline of my dress. I hated them for making me feel like this. I hated myself for giving them the power. Then my hand brushed against something in my purse. A card. I'd forgotten it was there. It was matte black, embossed in silver. Vincent Adler, private investigations, and scribbled beneath it in pen. If you ever need to find out the truth. A gift from a colleague at work. One who'd seen too much and spoken too little. At the time, I thought she was joking. Now I wasn't so sure. I left the bathroom with dry eyes and a decision. They wanted a spectacle. They were about to get one. But not tonight. Tonight, I would smile and play my part. Because some storms require patience. I walked back into the reception and watched as Jason slow danced with his wife beneath 1,000 twinkling lights. My parents beamed like they were crowning a king. And I stood in the shadows, phone in hand, texting the number on the card. Can we meet? Soon. I need help. The next morning, while the wedding flowers were still fresh, I met Vincent Adler in a tiny diner on the edge of the city. He was older than I expected. Clean cut, professional. But there was a look in his eyes that told me he'd seen the worst of people and stopped being surprised by it. I told him everything. About Luke, about the money, about my parents' coldness and the wedding spectacle. And when I handed him their business name, he raised an eyebrow. Restaurant group, huh? They do big volume? High end, I said. Multiple locations, always bragging about profits. He nodded slowly. People like that usually have something to hide. What can you find? He looked me dead in the eyes. Whatever you're ready to see. A week passed, then 2. I went back to work, sat through Luke's treatments, balanced bills on a knife's edge. But every day my phone buzzed with quiet updates from Vincent. He was digging, deep, and what he started to find made my blood run cold. It wasn't just financial sleight of hand. It wasn't just tax loopholes or shady deductions. It was full-on fraud. Shell accounts, offshore transactions, false invoices, money funneled to places with no names. And something worse. One night, Vincent texted, "Need to talk. Found something disturbing." We met in his office. He dropped a folder in front of me. Inside, emails, text threads, scanned documents, and one note, one line from my mother to my father. If she sells her share quietly, we can justify the gift. Otherwise, it's on us. My stomach turned. They were hoping I'd give up. They were willing to let Luke die just to push me out of the family business. The business my grandfather left to all of us, including me. But that wasn't all. One of the treatment centers I'd contacted, the one that quoted me the insane price, it turned out the figure had been manipulated. Vincent traced the paper trail back to a doctor, a man my parents had once donated to, a friend of the family. They'd asked him to inflate the cost, knowing I'd never afford it, knowing I'd break. I felt sick, but I wasn't broken. Not anymore. I looked at the evidence spread before me and saw not a daughter, but a weapon. They underestimated me. They taught me everything about control, image, and leverage. And now? Now I would use it all against them. Because there are lines you don't cross. And my son? He was the last one. Some truths don't explode. They unravel. Slow, quiet, devastating. Vincent didn't hand me the final files like some dramatic spy thriller. He just slid a plain flash drive across his desk, his expression unreadable. "I think you're ready to see everything now," he said. I didn't touch it at first. My hand hovered. My breath caught. Because part of me still hoped. Hoped that what I'd find would be bad but not unforgivable. That there would be some line my parents hadn't crossed. But they had. And the line was my son. I took the flash drive and plugged it into his office computer. The folder was labeled TRUTH. Inside were PDFs, images, email exports, bank statements. It looked clinical, unemotional. But I felt like I was staring at a coffin. The first document I opened was a series of wire transfers to a bank in the Bahamas. At first, they looked like generic business expenses. Supplier names, equipment purchases, charity donations. Except, none of them were real. Vincent had already cross-checked the businesses. They didn't exist. Some were registered under fake tax IDs. Others were listed at addresses that led to empty lots or UPS mailboxes. The money had been siphoned for years, millions in quiet theft. But it got worse. He pulled up a flagged email thread between my father and a man I recognized from an earlier hospital visit, Dr. Emerson, an oncologist who once called Luke's case too far gone, with a shrug, before handing me a bill that nearly made me vomit. The subject line read, "Urgent request, treatment estimate adjustment." My father had written, "We need it higher. If she thinks there's hope, she'll keep fighting. That means she'll stay. You understand?" The reply was short. "Consider it done. Same account?" I pushed away from the desk. My body felt like it had gone underwater, cold, numb, drifting. I wanted to scream, throw something, break every glass in the room. But I couldn't even lift my hands. "They knew," I whispered. "They knew he could be saved, and they made it look impossible." Vincent nodded grimly. "They were trying to corner you, emotionally, financially, legally." He pulled out another paper. It looked like an old letter, scanned and time-stamped from 4 years ago. My grandfather's signature was at the bottom. "To Samantha, I leave my 25% share in the family business. Use it well. Protect your future. Love, Pop." I blinked. 25%? I had always assumed it was something symbolic. A few shares. A gesture. My parents never mentioned it. But this was real power. A quarter of a multi-million-dollar company. "They wanted me to sell," I murmured. Vincent handed me the final piece. An email from my mother to my father, dated the day after I brought Luke's diagnosis to them. "If she sells quietly, we give her something. It's cleaner that way. If not, she'll break eventually. Everyone does." That's when I realized they weren't just neglectful. They were predators, and I was done pretending they were anything else. I left Vincent's office with the flash drive in my purse and a plan forming in my mind like thunderclouds. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment beside Luke's bed. He was asleep, his little chest rising and falling in shallow rhythms. His giraffe toy clutched under his arm. I whispered, "I'm going to fix this, baby, no matter what it takes." I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying every moment, every lie, every choice. They thought they could break me. They thought I'd cave, sell my shares, walk away. But what they didn't realize is that I'd already lost everything I could lose. And a woman with nothing left? She's the most dangerous kind. Over the next few days, I went quiet. I didn't respond to Jason's texts. Didn't call my parents. I played the role of exhausted, defeated daughter. Let them think I was slipping back into silence. But behind the scenes, I was preparing. I copied the files in triplicate. Flash drive, cloud, printed backups stored at a friend's house. I met with a lawyer Vincent recommended, one with a reputation for destroying corporate fraud rings. She reviewed the documents and raised her eyebrows. You understand what happens if this goes public? I nodded. They lose everything. And you? I already have. Jason called again the following week. I picked up this time. Hey, haven't heard from you. You okay? Peachy, I said, keeping my voice neutral. He hesitated. Mom and Dad were wondering if you were ready to talk about options. I nearly laughed. Options? You know, maybe selling your part of the business, for Luke. They still want to help, if you're reasonable. I stared at the flash drive sitting on my kitchen table. I'll think about it, I said sweetly. Good. We're all family, Sam. Let's not make this ugly. Too late. 2 days later, I scheduled a board meeting. As a shareholder, I had the right. They didn't see it coming. I arrived in a gray blazer, no makeup, hair tied back. They were already there, my father glaring, my mother fake smiling, Jason smug in his tailored suit. You called this meeting for what exactly? My father said sharply. I want to review the books, I said calmly, and discuss a few discrepancies. Their faces shifted, the first flicker of fear. I also have some documents I think the IRS would find interesting. I'm giving you a choice. Step down, or be taken down. My mother's smile vanished. You wouldn't. I leaned forward, pulled the flash drive from my purse, and placed it on the table like a loaded weapon. I already did. They panicked. Of course they did. My father threatened legal action. My mother tried guilt. Jason called me unstable and obsessed. They begged. They shouted. They offered me money. But I didn't want their money anymore. I wanted justice. I gave them 72 hours. Turn over control of the business. Publicly step down. And wire the full cost of Luke's treatment directly to the hospital. Or I would go to the press, to the IRS, to every investor and partner who still believed in the image they had sold for years. They cracked on the third day. It wasn't grace. It was survival. That night, I sat beside Luke again. Only this time, there was no dread. No desperation. The funds had been transferred. His treatment could continue. The hospital scheduled his next cycle. I held his hand and whispered, We're going to win, sweetheart. But I wasn't done yet. Because it wasn't just about Luke anymore. It was about me. About all the years they spent trying to erase me. I took back what was mine. And I made them watch me do it. The moment of truth didn't happen in a courtroom or a boardroom. It happened in a ballroom. My father's 50th birthday party was a spectacle. Of course it was. A rented hall in downtown Chicago, gold accents on every table, a live jazz band flown in from New York. Every guest was dressed like they were attending a presidential gala. And I was there too. Not in shadows this time. Not hiding. I wore a black dress. Simple. Sharp. Unapologetic. Jason smirked when he saw me. My mother offered her usual tight-lipped smile. My father gave me a nod, more out of habit than warmth. But I said nothing. Just waited. When the time came for speeches, the MC called my father up. He raised a glass, basking in applause, and launched into the kind of monologue only men like him can deliver. Self-congratulatory, polished, dripping with false humility. That's when I stood. I'd like to say something, I said, walking toward the front with my laptop in hand. My father blinked. Samantha, now's really not... I didn't stop. I reached the projector, plugged in the HDMI cable, and hit play. The screen behind him flickered to life. First slide, a wire transfer. Second, an email to Dr. Emerson. Third, scanned IRS reports with red flags circled. And then, Luke. A photo of him in the hospital, bald but smiling, clutching his giraffe. Below it, in bold letters, "Am I worth saving?" Gasps rippled through the room. Jason stood furious. "What the hell is this?" I didn't flinch. "This," I said, turning to the crowd, "is the truth. The man you're toasting tonight, he and my mother tried to bankrupt their own daughter and kill their own grandson to protect their money." My mother's face drained of color. "Samantha, please." "No," I snapped. "You don't get to beg now." Then came the audio. Dr. Emerson's voice echoed through the room. "You'll get your inflated estimate. Same account?" My father lunged for the laptop. "Turn it off." But it was too late. Phones were out. People were recording. The story was no longer mine to control. And that's exactly what I wanted. I let it all play. All of it. Until there was nothing left but silence. No applause, no toast, just shame. The aftermath came quickly. The IRS began an immediate audit. Their assets were frozen. Jason's fiancée left him. Her father, a federal judge, had seen enough. The engagement ring landed back on the table like a dropped gavel. And my mother? The woman who had spent her entire life pretending to be a polished pearl cracked in front of 100 witnesses. I was scared, she whispered to me later in the empty ballroom. "Scared you'd take it all. Scared of what your grandfather gave you." I looked her in the eyes and said the thing I'd held in for years. I never wanted to take anything. I just wanted my son to live. She cried, but I didn't comfort her. Some tears are too late. The money came soon after, court-ordered. Enough to cover the treatments, the therapy, the travel, and more than enough for me to never worry again. Luke finished his final chemo round 3 months later. He rang the bell himself. Strong, smiling, alive. We moved to California, far from the shadows, into a little house by the beach where the sun feels like hope and the air doesn't carry old ghosts. He runs again now. He laughs. He eats real food. And I live. People think revenge is loud. But the real kind? It's quiet, calculated, cold. It doesn't scream, it doesn't throw punches. It simply ends with the truth exposed, and the guilty finally seen for what they are. My family used to say blood is everything, but blood doesn't raise your child at 2 a.m. It doesn't sit through chemo or skip meals to buy medicine. Love does that, and sometimes love looks like war. Because when you're forced to choose between protecting your child or preserving the illusion of family, there is no choice. There is only survival. I don't regret what I did. They burned the bridge long before I lit the match. And now? Now I build something new, brick by brick, beside a boy who deserved the world from the start. Have you ever felt betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you? Share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. And if you want more stories like this about justice, healing, and finding your power, hit subscribe. Because sometimes the only way to heal is to rise.